Why do U.S. leaders hate Russia and China? Oh no.
Hey folks, now we all know that mistakes were made in China in the way religious
Understatement of the fucking century right here.
people were treated. You know, especially during the Cultural Revolution with the Gang of Four. A lot of the way that people who practiced their religion were treated was just wrong. And it wasn't just...
And continues to be. China still cracks down on people of certain religions. Like, what?
Muslims. It was, you know, Roman Catholics, Buddhists, other religious groups in China faced, you know, mistreatment by the Chinese Communist Party. And the Chinese Communist Party has been very, very open about the mistakes that were made during that time, and they...
Excuse me? No. 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 China is incredibly silent on these issues, especially to their own people. Please, try and search, and again, this isn't necessarily religious, but in terms of people standing up to, like, the government, try and go and Google Tiananmen Square in China and see what happens. I'd love to hear how open China is about the mistakes and horrible things they've done in the past.
They've tried to correct them. And, you know, that's not to say that there aren't mistakes that still go on, right? And that the issue of how religion is treated in China is constantly in flux. We've recently seen a rapprochement between the Vatican and Beijing, and, you know, some friendly relations established there. But regardless, there are a lot of forces that are talking about what's going on with the Uyghurs in China. And a lot of what they're saying can't be confirmed.
Oh god, are we gonna go to bat for China and their fucking concentration camps? Great.
Burger King foot lettuce. The last thing you'd want in your Burger King burger is someone's foot fungus, but as it turns out, that might be what you get. A 4chaner uploaded a photo anonymously to the site showcasing his feet in a plastic bin of lettuce with the statement, "This is the lettuce you eat at Burger King." Admittedly, he had shoes on, but that's even worse. The post went live at 11:38 p.m.
If I had to guess, this was probably lettuce they were going to throw away at the end of the day. Could not. I could be wrong. It could be some jackass in food service legitimately doing this, but...
On July 16th, and a mere 20 minutes later, the Burger King in question was alerted to the rogue employee. At least, I hope he's rogue. How did it happen? Well, the BK employee hadn't removed the EXIF data from the uploaded photo, which suggested the culprit was somewhere in Mayfield Heights, Ohio. This was at 11:47. 3 minutes later, at 11:50, the Burger King branch address was posted with wishes of happy unemployment. 5 minutes later, the news station was contacted by another 4chaner. And 3 minutes later, at 11:58, a link was posted, BK's Tell Us About Us online form. The foot photo, otherwise known as Exhibit A, was attached. Cleveland Scene magazine contacted the BK in question the next day. When questioned, the breakfast shift manager said, "Oh, I know who that is. He's getting fired." Mystery solved by 4chan. Now,
that's funny.
Right? A lot of these reports that we're seeing say a lot of really, really intense things, but if you dig a little bit deeper...
Let's take a look, shall we? Article from Vox. Concentration camps and forced labor. China's repression of the Uyghurs explained. Juhur Ilham has not heard from his father since 2017. Her dad, Ilham Tahodi, is an economics professor and prominent Uyghur intellectual in Xinjiang, China. He ran a website, Uyghur Online, that focused on issues pertaining to the Muslim ethnic minority group. Chinese authorities repeatedly shut down the website. Uyghur Says the family, sorry if I'm mispronouncing anything, says her family received death threats. Chinese authorities also disappeared her father multiple times before detaining him in 2014 and quickly finding him guilty on separatism charges. He was sentenced to life in prison. At first, Uyghur told me because her father was a political prisoner, the family could visit him every few months, but then the Chinese government cut off access entirely. Uyghurs is how it's pronounced? Sorry. Uyghur is in the United States. She still has extended family in Xinjiang, the northeastern region in China where most Uyghurs live. She does not talk with them either. If they talk to me or if they receive a phone call from me, I don't think anything good will happen to them, she told me over the phone last week. Uyghur's father was targeted by the Chinese government for his advocacy of Uyghur rights, but in recent years, the Chinese Communist Party has arbitrarily detained between 1 million and 3 million. Let's see what this source goes to. Testimony of Deputy Assistant Secretary Scott Busby, Senate Foreign Relations Committee Subcommittee on East Asia, the Pacific, International Cybersecurity Policy. Chairman Gardner, Ranking Member Markey, and the member of subcommittee, thank you for the invitation to appear before you today to testify on the human rights situation in China. This hearing is particularly timely, coming from the week before the 70th anniversary of the United Nations adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This declaration, with the General Assembly adopted by consensus, states that every individual has the right of freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief expression, peaceable assembly, and association. Defending these universal rights and fundamental freedoms has been and will continue to be an essential element of American foreign policy, including U.S. policy towards China, as the President's national security strategy states, quote, the United States supports those who seek freedom, individual dignity, the rule of law, yada, yada, yada. Let me see if I can find. Today, the Chinese Communist Party is implementing a system where, to quote President Xi Jinping, the party exercises overall leadership all over areas of endeavor in every part of the country. Space for civil society and free thought continue to shrink. There is mass detention of Uyghurs, ethnic Kazakhs, and members of other Muslim minority groups in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. Surveillance is intrusive and omnipresent, not only in Xinjiang, but also in many parts of China. The government blocked U.S. press and the social media websites imprisons its own people for sharing their opinions online. Those who call on China to live up to its own laws and commitments to protect human rights have been punished, and China is doing the same to Chinese citizens abroad, including harassing political dissidents on foreign soil, detaining journalists, family members who remain in China, and coercing members of Chinese Muslim minority groups to return from overseas. Some of the worst human rights abuses are occurring unchecked in Xinjiang's Uyghur Autonomous Region since April 2017. Chinese authorities have detained at least 800,000 and possibly more than 2 million Uyghur and members of other Muslim minorities in the internment camps for indefinite periods of time. This is the U.S. government assessment backed by our intelligence community and open source reporting. Reports suggest that most of those detained are not being charged with crimes and their families lack information about their whereabouts, their well-being, and for how long they will be held. The reasons given for detention appear to vary widely. In some cases, police have claimed they are detaining someone merely because they traveled abroad or because they have family abroad. There appears to be no ability to contest such detention. At first, China denied such camps existed, as numerous public reports emerged through the testimony of brave victims and intrepid researchers and journalists. The international community began to speak out about the mass internments. Chinese authorities have recently asserted that those internment camps are, quote, vocational education centers designed to help young employed people in Xinjiang learn job skills and the Chinese language, glossing over the fact that renowned Uyghur intellectuals and retired professionals are also detained there. Former detainees who have reached safety have spoken of relentless indoctrination and harsh conditions. They report mandatory classes where detainees are required to recite communist slogans and sing songs praising the Chinese Communist Party. Failure to quickly learn these lessons leads to beatings and food deprivation. There are reports of use of stress positions, cold cells, and sleep deprivation in the camps. We have also seen reports of other forms of torture or cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment, including sexual abuse. One common goal in reports from former detainees seems to be forcing detainees to renounce Islam and embrace the Chinese Communist Party. For example, praying and using For example, praying and using common Muslim greetings are forbidden in the camps. There are reports that authorities constantly surveil detainees to ensure that they do not pray even in their own beds in the middle of the night. Detainees are reportedly forced to eat pork and drink alcohol. Some have reported being forcibly medicated with unknown substances. This is all so fucked up. Life in Xinjiang outside these internment camps is not much better. The Chinese government is engaged. You get it. Basically, they're having internment camps, or they're trying to, like, re-educate people against their will, which is incredibly fucked up. And hey, as much as I'm for, like, socialism and political systems that are in favor of the working class, I am not in favor of authoritarian measures or re-education camps of any sort. Completely fucked. Anyway, so let's go back to the guy who's claiming that all this shit isn't real.
The only source is some think tank or some institute or some policy source that's linked to Saudi Arabia.
Our intelligence communities also confirm this. And hey, I don't like the CIA, but at the end of the day, I do think that the information that they gather is usually pretty correct. It's where a huge amount of our budget goes, is military and military intelligence. Like, I get it. I'm not going to say the US doesn't have interests in making China look bad, but that doesn't mean China doesn't make itself look bad. We know China has, like, no regard for their citizens at all. We've seen this. We know about Tiananmen Square. We know about tons of awful things the Chinese government has done. We know about Hong Kong. So let's not pretend that the idea that China has re-education camps where they're interning and torturing a certain ethnic group that doesn't necessarily jive with their communistic government, that's not unreasonable. That's not a claim that I'd go, well, you know, that's pretty outlandish. That's reasonable.
Seeing a lot of personal accounts from people. People are saying, well, I was here, I saw this, and they're all over Western media making their claim. And
okay, the same thing happened in, like, the Jewish Holocaust, right? You have people after the war talking about how awful it was. That doesn't mean that personal accounts are always wrong. You should always have more corroborating evidence, which we have for both, again, the Jewish Holocaust and what's happening to Uyghurs in China. But testimony is also a powerful explanatory evidence, right? Getting someone who's been there or has accounts from there to talk about it is powerful, and it's not immediately invalidated just because it's an individual talking about their lived experience and not literally a photograph of someone starving. Which, by the way, I'm pretty sure there were photos a while back from these camps. Chinese internment camp photos. Not sure how TOS some of these are going to be. Hold on, I'm going to turn the camera off while I look at this because I don't think a lot of these are going to be, you know, TOS. I know I saw one of someone, like, starving, so I'm trying to find that. Picture of a political prisoner in one of China's internment camps taken secretly by a family member. I can't show you this on stream, but I will link to it in chat if you want to take a look at this. This is, like, really fucked up. Like, not safe for life material, if you'd like to take a look at it. Here's a link in the chat, but I can't show you, obviously, on stream for TOS reasons, probably. But yeah, fucked up shit.
if you look a little deeper, these are people that are just anti-China activists that have an axe to grind. And a lot of them are linked to...
Yeah, I think most people would have an axe to grind towards a government that's putting people in internment camps and starving them. Like, I'd feel the same about America, and I do about some of the immigration camps that we have now where people who are crossing the border are being separated from their kids, and they're all being, like, put in cages and shit. That's also fucked up. I can think that's fucked up, and look at what China is doing and going, oh shit, that's really, really fucked up.
To the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which really has no grounds to ever lecture anyone on human rights. So, a lot of the
Can we not do whataboutism? Just because Saudi Arabia is awful, if Saudi Arabia was like, hey, China's doing a bad. If China's doing a bad, then that would make Saudi Arabia right, even though they might be hypocrites for being right. That doesn't mean that them pointing out something bad someone else does automatically doesn't count just because they're hypocrites.
This needs to be taken with a grain of salt. And there's a lot of things that aren't being reported on. For example, in the Uyghur regions, there's been a huge amount of economic development. You know, the Chinese government has gone in there and started, raising people up out of poverty.
Yeah, they're probably also trying to convert them from Islam to whatever. Not being religious, believing in the state, whatever. That could be part of their re-education efforts.
They've been building infrastructure. They've been increasing the level of employment, making sure there's good jobs there. And
again, I don't really trust anything that comes out of the Chinese government's mouth. So if China says, we've been doing these efforts in this area, why would I believe them? Why would I believe a country that literally doesn't even allow their citizens to Google things that they don't find, like, in their best interest? Of course they're going to have misinformation and they're going to say, like, oh, look at all these good things we're doing. Thank you to Muggle CS for following. Welcome to the stream.
Furthermore, what you're definitely not hearing in the media reports is how the Chinese government has been promoting Islam.
No.
Islam, right?
I don't think the Chinese government is too hot on basically any religion, much less Islam. I think Christians in China also have issues too, practicing in public or having public church services.
In the Uyghur regions, the Chinese government has been sponsoring the construction of seminaries and mosques. They've been, giving platforms to...
I would imagine that's part of their efforts. If they are doing that, it's probably specific state-sponsored mosques that put forward a very China communist-friendly version of Islam, right? You take it from multiple fronts. You take people and you put them into re-education camps, which are basically just concentration camps, or you torture them into accepting your way of thinking, or they die. And secondly, you get people to go to these state-approved mosques or churches that are going to try and sort of blend what you believe about Islam into a state-sanctioned, pro-state version of that, right? Those things could happen in tandem.
To imams, they've been doing a lot to promote Islam in the Uyghur provinces, but promote Islam that is not, anti-communist. Islam that doesn't call for the violent overthrow of the Chinese government, but Islam that is...
That's kind of an understatement of the fact that they're doing basically propaganda mosques, right? Like, again, I am a socialist. I think socialism is good. However, I also believe in the principle that people should have the right to believe whatever they want, and if they want to assemble together and practice a certain religion, even if I don't agree with that religion, they should have the right to do so without interference from myself or the government, right? That's a left-leaning principle that I think all of us should share. Like, I want policies that benefit labor and benefit the people over that of rich elites. However, you don't do that by forcing people into it. What you need to do is try and educate people in a reasonable, non-authoritarian way about how their class, how most people in this country have been fucked over by a few very powerful people. And then, through voting, you try and change policy. If you're at the point where you're having, like, revolutions and trying to change people's opinions with the barrel of a gun and threats of violence against them, you've already failed. You already have a failed state.
sensible, moderate Islam that is not the kind of thing that is being promoted by these extremists. And there is a real fear of extremists. Read about these knife attacks that have happened in China, where people get on trains and...
How about the tank attacks? Or is that something the Chinese government did, so that's okay?
Pull out knives and just start killing people in big numbers. They have a real fear. Seems pretty clear to me that there are some forces in the world today that are very, very determined to stop what China is doing around the world. The fact...
Yeah, China's bad, right? I can both say American, interventionalism and sort of our neo-imperialist policies are bad, and also look at China and what they're doing, in Africa, for instance, and their neo-imperialist policies, and say those are bad. That's being internally consistent, right? I'm not against American imperialism because it's American. I'm against it because it's imperialism. And if China does the big imperialism, also bad. Authoritarianism. I'm against authoritarianism here in the States and in China. Both are bad. I'm not playing a sports game where I want one side to win because it's my side. It's about the right thing to do and what's best for people living in society. What is all this whataboutism and No. Bad is bad.
that China is doing the Belt and Road Initiative, building infrastructure in developing countries, raising...
Again, the United States did the same thing, but that benefits the people who are going to exploit that area, right? China might be lifting some people out of poverty in the same way that a lot of people in China were lifted out of poverty after the United States shipped a lot of jobs there, and that's a reality, right? They're going to do the same thing. Now China's going to start building infrastructure and factories in Africa, and then they're going to outsource things there for cheap labor purposes. Just because they're building roads and infrastructure there doesn't mean that they aren't benefiting from those things. And you can argue whether or not you think the cost, benefit of that is good or bad, but they're not doing it out of the kindness of their heart. They're doing it because if they want to outsource labor there or want to have interest in that area and try and invest in it, then they need to make it more developed so that they can have an industrialized area that they can either outsource labor to, or B, exploit for resources. This is how neo-imperialism works. You don't go into a country and take it over like you did in the old days, like the UK and a lot of the world. You go there, you invest, you use capitalism, and yes, China uses capitalism to get your interests in line with the country. You try and invest in industry there, and then take the benefits of their labor, and you don't even have to invade, right? It's complicated, but it is a thing, and just because they aren't literally invading doesn't mean that it's not imperialism. Sala8123, thank you for following. Welcome to the stream.
People up out of poverty. This is a threat to the monopolies, the big bankers that control the world. They keep the world poor so that they can stay rich. China is challenging that global order.
No, they're not. In what way are they challenging the global order? All they've done is make the elites the party and the people who are in charge of it, right? Just because, it would be how do I put this? It'd be like the movie Freddy versus Jason. Yeah, they might fight each other, but you don't want either of them to win because then they're going to come after you, right? Just because China might be something that the banking industry in the West or wherever doesn't automatically make China good. Doesn't make bankers good either, but because two big forces are fighting over who gets to exploit the population doesn't make the newer one better. Right? Either way, the population is still getting exploited.
They are raising people up out of poverty. And a central part of China's Belt and Road Initiative is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor that is opening up. This is huge. China and Pakistan are cooperating like never before. All kinds of construction projects.
Oof, that was before the, wasn't there just some, issue? Oh, wait, no, that wasn't Pakistan. That was India and China. I apologize. India and China were having some border skirmishes in the past year.
Kinds of efforts to really just light up that whole region. It's big. And it's pretty clear that Saudi Arabia and Wall Street and London want to stop the China-Pakistan economic corridor. And so they're doing everything they can to try and incite Muslims around the world to hate China. That's basically what they're doing. All kinds of efforts are being made to get Muslims around the world to hate China. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't mistakes that are being made, and we're not on the ground. We don't know what's happening. But a lot of the things we're seeing in American media...
Okay, but some people have been, and they've come and they've said, hey, there's, like, concentration camps. It's real bad. I'm gonna trust them on that. Why wouldn't I? They've been there. They went through it.
Yeah, they're very, very sensational. Meanwhile, China is actually doing a lot to improve the lives of people in the historically Islamic regions, giving them opportunities.
I understand that America has interests in keeping China down because if there's another superpower globally, which I'd argue China already is anyway, that it's a threat to the American empire. I get that, but that doesn't mean that everything that's said about China is untrue. If there's anything you know about global superpowers, they have a tendency of treating their own populations pretty poorly, right? Look at how America and its legal system have treated people who weren't, like, landowning white dudes for most of its history, right? Just saying. Most empires throughout history tend to be a bit authoritarian one way or another, you know? That's kind of how you get to be that big.
Giving them job training, building seminaries and mosques, providing economic opportunity. And that's the side of the story that definitely isn't being told. And a lot of the accounts we're hearing are very sensational and can't completely be verified. So I urge people to just calm down, right? I urge people to just calm down. Let's try to get to the facts.
Let's just calm down about these alleged concentration camps. No, no, that's not something you need to be calm about. That's something that you should really, really care about and do something about, whether it's for advocating for policies or sanctions or whatever. Not something you should be calm about.
Let's try to find out what's actually happening. And let's remember that the way to stop terrorism is with jobs and schools and housing. Right? People turn to terrorism just like they turn to drugs and the drug narcotics trade. They turn to that when they don't have other options. And what China is doing in the world today by building...
That's kind of an oversimplification. Like, look at the IRA. Like, people turn to terrorist actions for all sorts of reasons.
Infrastructure, building trains and airports and hospitals and schools. This is really important.
Imagine, like, imagine this argument in the 40s and being like, yeah, Hitler's, putting people in camps and ghettos, but hey, look at all the infrastructure projects the Nazis have done. Like, who the fuck cares? You can have infrastructure and not have concentration camps.
This is the way to get out of terrorism. The fact that China has a program in Afghanistan where they're enabling children to get operations and surgeries they wouldn't be able to get by just going over the Chinese border. The fact that China is trying to give port access to Afghanistan so that Afghanistan can have manufacturing jobs, this landlocked country in Central Asia. This is all unprecedented. China is basically paving the way.
I don't think that's unprecedented. I think countries all the time make deals with other countries that are economically and politically advantageous for both parties. That's just how international politics works.
For a world where we don't have terrorism and drugs and the horrors that we're...
Okay, there's always going to be terrorism and drugs. That's just like the world.
seeing. The China plan with Iran about trade and transport for Afghanistan to bring opportunities to Afghanistan to stop the drug trade, that's huge. right? The cooperation between China and Russia in terms of economic development, that's huge as well. And that China's role in the world is very, very good. And it seems to me that there are some
No. Look, again, I'm not here about this whataboutism, but most empires in human history, if you look at them, haven't been all that great. China, really, really not great. Incredibly authoritarian. Incredibly overbearing on their citizens. Ridiculous laws. Stupid stuff like social credit scores. And fuck, the way credit scores are even used in employment in the United States aren't good. Much less, you know, how they're used in China. Concentration camps, which we have evidence for. Re-education. Not good. Not good. Look at Hong Kong. Look at anyone who speaks up against the one-party Chinese system. Look, it's a nightmare, man. Like, I get it. I get that I agree that socialism is a good way to move forward as a global society. But sucking authoritarian dick just because they speak out against, like, capitalism on the surface, despite the fact that they basically run on a state capitalist system at this point, isn't a good look, and it's not helping us get to a place that's better for most of the people who live on this planet.
Forces that would really like to stop what China's doing. And part of doing that is inciting Muslims around the world.
This ain't a leftist. I mean, he is. He's a tanky. He's like a weird tanky leftist. I'm not gonna disavow this guy from the left just because he's shitty. Like, he's shitty, but he's on the left. He's just on, like, the authoritarian left.
World to have hatred and resentment.
Thank you to JTB 1200 for following.
For the People's Republic of China. So I urge people to just kind of cool down, look for the actual facts, and take everything that the mainstream American media, and especially any media tied with Saudi Arabia, take anything they say with a grain of salt.
Okay, but not you, who works for literal Russian propaganda network. You we shouldn't take with a grain of salt. Brilliant.
Because, hysteria, extreme emotions never really solves the problem. Are mistakes possibly being made? Perhaps, but we don't know all the facts, and I urge people to slow down.
Remember that segment from the Twilight Zone movie where the racist guy, like, gets sent back in history and is, like, treated like shit, I almost want that to happen, where it's like a Twilight Zone and this dude wakes up in a Uyghur, like, concentration camp and has to live there for a week. I would watch the Vosh debate, but that's a no-go on Twitch.